Hey everyone, welcome to the SIG Network Policy API sub-project meeting. Today is the 2nd of December 2025. Let's all follow the CNCF Code of Conduct and be nice to each other. We have a few items on the agenda, so we'll just go through them in order like usual. If there is any new people who are attending this meeting for the first time, feel free to raise your hands and introduce yourself. We are a friendly bunch. Okay. Let's get started. The first item is from Winship. Dan, you're on the call, so want to take the floor?
Yeah, I was just sort of trying to write up some documentation of how network policy and works and realized that there's some undefined behavior there. If you went to open that, I don't know if you did, but it didn't show up in your screen share. Okay, yeah, now it's showing up. Um, that so there at least historically, Cilium did something different than everyone else here because it was actually implementing the policy inside the pod rather than outside it. And I wanted to make sure that for cluster network policy, at the very least, we document all, any variation that might occur, but better yet would be that we don't vary. And I'm not sure how much this is something we want to discuss in the meeting versus I just wanted to call people's attention to it so we could discuss it in the bug.
Yeah, I'm just getting caught up from my PTO myself, but if I do see there's some conversation from Calico here and +1 to documenting
Should we
what we
just
get out of the
collect
discussion. But yeah.
what implementations already do and see if we by accident all do the same thing?
Yeah, I think Dan mentioned that Cilium is doing something different for network policy at least, but for CNPs, let's try to do that.
I feel like historically they were doing something different, but when I went and looked now, it seems like maybe they changed it at some point. Or I'm misremembering what they were doing before. So yeah, it would be good to have. But it sounded from what Sean was saying that Calico may do slightly different things in different modes. So
And is this something that falls under the radar of a conformance test when there is two features like services and policies, which is kind of shipped by SIG network? If that's a way of enforcing it, or are we just like, are we trying to standardize on how the end result should look like, or are we trying to give some leeway for implementation specificness?
in general, I'm always happier with saying that there is one way to do it, and we expect everybody to do it that way. Um, so, but yes, this the idea is that there would be conformance tests of whatever we decide. So
Yeah,
yeah, part of
I
it is
think,
that there are these unwritten rules of how network policy works, and as Bowie and I were, I think it was Bowie or
Yeah, I
uh,
had a comment.
yeah,
Uh,
and we have different ideas of what the unwritten rules are. So and end up coming up with very slightly different judgments as a result. And so I feel like we should figure this out and then write down the unwritten rules for CNP. Obviously, we can't retroactively change things for network policy V1.
yeah, sounds good. Okay, so let's all chime in on how implementations are doing it today, and we can try to reach a consensus on the issue. Thanks, Dan, for raising awareness around this. Next one's from Balaj. I don't know if I'm butchering your name. I'm sorry.
That was actually perfect. Yeah, so sorry, I didn't file an issue. I just came up with this just before my vacation, so I'll file an issue for this. I have a mostly working implementation of cluster network policy for Cilium, and one issue with the conformance test that I ran into is the semantics of CIDR rules. So it seems from the conformance test that they expect that CIDR rules would also match cluster internal traffic, which I don't really see why that would be the case. It doesn't really make sense. It's not supposed to work that way. For example, in network policy, I'm quoting a block from the documentation for network policy there that says, it should be matching on external IPs. But the test is explicitly matching both on, so it's using 000/0 as a default for matching everything, plus it has a specific match on an IP. At least for Cilium, that currently doesn't work, and it will require some pretty extensive refactoring. So I'm wondering what the reasoning here is, why it was done this way. Was this deliberate? What is the use case? I don't know the background.
We had an NPEP for the network CIDR, and there is a few points I want to add, but I will let Dan go first because he raised his hand first.
Okay. So Bowie just mentioned in chat, but yes, the should there in the documentation that you quoted is to the user. It's saying that it doesn't really make sense to use pod IPs because they're constantly changing. We discussed this at length a year ago, 2 years ago, I don't remember, and people agreed that the expectation is that all network policy. So by the way, the consensus is that Cilium's current implementation is wrong, but that the network policy documentation was never clear about that, and so it's conformant. We wanted to fix that loophole for CNP. So the idea is that all rules are evaluated on all packets that pass through the pod network, and therefore, if there are IP block rules or CNP networks rules that refer to pod IPs, then those are evaluated on packets that are passing through the pod network, and therefore they affect that traffic. So that was the consensus that we came to. It's not that there's a strong use case for having it work. It's just that the expectation of how people were going to implement it meant that it makes more sense for it to work that way.
That doesn't, I mean, okay. I'm somewhat surprised that we would have a requirement that doesn't really have a use case behind it, because this will, if some implementations might have an easier time with this, I think in Cilium it's not going to be that easy. I understand the logic of wanting to be consistent, but I really, other than for the default case where 0/0, I don't really see why it would even make sense to be able to match on a pod IP, because it's ephemeral, right? In what case would you even be able to make use of this?
CIDR blocks?
Yeah. So basically, you say I want to match on 10.3.2.1, and that's currently the IP of a specific pod. And the current expectation of cluster network policy is that this will actually match the pod. And if you say deny traffic to that IP, it will deny or block traffic for that pod.
But it can match on random IP, right? On any IP.
Yeah.
So what I saw is that users used to have run workloads on VMs or on other places in the same network with well-defined IP, and they use these CIDRs to match on that.
Yeah, that's not a problem, but that's external to the cluster. My point is that the current semantics of cluster network policy requires CIDR rules to match on cluster internal traffic as well. So if the IP that you specify is an IP of a pod, the policy should be doing something to the pod, deny or allow, depending on what the rule says.
Right. So the network CIDR, when we added it, was, like Antonio was saying, an IP. It could be any IP. We did not distinguish a notion of pod CIDR or a service CIDR or an external CIDR. External to what, right? It's abstract. That was one reason I remember. Second thing is you can do a deny to 0000/0, which means to all IPs. And then you're just losing the semantics. Like you can't really say that the network cannot be including the pod CIDR in the 0000, right? What does that mean? Does it include the pod CIDR or not? when you say select everything and deny?
Well, the current semantics in other network policies is that if you do a 000/0, it does not match cluster internal traffic, because that needs to be matched using, at least in Cilium, this is how it works. I wouldn't know how to implement this any other way.
But from pure networking standpoint, 0000 actually does stand for everything, right? Like,
sure, I agree.
So
and also, go
okay.
ahead, Dan. I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
So I was got a handful of things. So one, when this was discussed, it's true. All of the use cases involved either 000/0 or somebody referring to the entire pod network CIDR like as a whole. Nobody has suggested any good use cases for referring to single IPs. Although I think what Antonio was getting at is some people do run VMs with fixed pod IPs as pods in their cluster. And so that would potentially be a use case. Although in that case, you can just use a pod selector to select the pod. So it's not clear why you need the IP anyway. So anyway, all of the use cases I think that we have involve the 000 case. So we could say that the IP blocks and CIDR rules apply to pod traffic. However, it is invalid to write a network policy that matches specific pods, and that would be, if not rejected, at least it wouldn't work. So it is possible that we could reopen this discussion again.
Yeah, if there was a valid use case, I would say, yeah, sure, let's keep it the way it is. But there really doesn't seem to be, other than the match on everything, which is 00/0. So I don't know. I'm proposing the changes. I mean, I can certainly file an issue for that. I mean, I should file an issue for this so that it can be properly documented, or unless there already was one when this discussion originally came up. Sorry for reopening an existing discussion. I was not aware that there was one before. I wanted to know the history of this decision, why it's implemented the way it is.
Oh, that's totally fine. Thanks for bringing it up here, right? Boe or Antonio, I don't know who raised first. Boe, you want to go first, and then Antonio?
Yeah, I mean, you could imagine a system, because Kubernetes doesn't really talk about IPAM, so like where pods could get a range and you could block it. So like that's one thing. Now the question would be, do we want to basically disallow that kind of thing? Probably people already do it, so it's a little bit of like, what do you do for those people? The other thing, and I mentioned this in the chat, is like, I think historically it's been very hard to figure out what we mean by external versus internal. Like, just pinning down that definition seems to be very difficult in a precise way, which you need for, like, for example, firewall rules.
So that's the main problem. You cannot define internal traffic. The API is unambiguous this way. You put an IP, you match on the IP. If you say you match an IP if it's internal, then you need to define what's internal. And you are not going to be able to define what's internal.
We already define what's internal.
You do?
Yeah.
Is the definition just from a pod or to a pod?
I just pasted this in Slack. If you say namespace selector, empty selector, that selects every single pod and nothing else. So that is pretty much the definition of, I mean, you have to be able to implement that to be conformant. So your implementation already has to be able to distinguish pod traffic from non-pod traffic.
What about node traffic? Is node selector internal or external to a cluster?
And the other thing is, once we are having now DRA with IPs, and you are working on the multi-network thing, and look, this is going to be, I mean, I'm not into the multi-network thing, but this is going to break all those use cases. Because the internal thing there is going to be much more complex.
I mean, if we're talking about this is already the case, not with cluster network policy, but network policy. This is how network policy behaves today in Cilium.
In Cilium. In
Yes.
Cilium, but Cilium is the only one that implemented that way. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, there is at least one implementation that does it this way. That means that it's clearly possible. I don't know if that's something that needs to change in the future. I'm just trying to see why there is this discrepancy. Clearly, I mean, even the documentation for network policy allows for that because it's explicitly says this should be cluster external IPs. Right?
Well, my question is, if I'm a user and I put an IP on something, my expectation is that whatever that has that IP drops. And if you're telling me is, I need to check also if that is from a pod, it means that I need to have knowledge of the IPAN of the cluster. I really find confusing to make assumptions on the type of traffic on the API of a firewall.
Yeah, it's like
Nadia has her hand
depends on the
raised.
user expectation,
May I
right? It's like
suggest at this point, it looks like we've been discussing that for some time. I feel like a Slack thread would be a better place to continue this discussion. It doesn't seem like we are converging to anything. And then if we decide the reopening the issue is a good idea, that would be the next step.
And I can also point to the NPEP and the SIG network meeting discussion itself, which we had 2 years ago or something. I'm pretty sure we brought it up in main SIG network and we discussed there. So
Sure, I would appreciate if you point me to the original discussion.
I think, okay,
if I
so
can
it's
find it.
actually here. I already found the link. Let
Oh,
me
perfect.
put it here. And whatever was decided in that NPEP was all based on consensus from the SIG network main meeting. Maybe take a look at this discussion or maybe watch the meeting recording because that might have more information than the meeting notes that we have there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving forward, and it's again from you, Balazs, FQDN rule semantics.
Yeah, I think there was, from what I heard, there was some discussion on this on KubeCon. I couldn't attend. So right now, the semantics of FQDN rules is that if you have a wildcard match, it matches the domain and all subdomains. There was, in the Cilium community, there was a proposal to allow this, and there were some concerns raised that this potentially opens up vulnerabilities because the subdomains can be managed by different entities. And I just wonder, was this discussed, considered? I think Cilium will eventually go in the direction of allowing matches on subdomains. I mean, if cluster network policy demands that that's the semantics, then that's how it's going to be. But I just want to know what the reasoning is so that I can justify the implementation of that. So I'm talking about to give examples. Let me try to like if we have, for example, start.example.com matches something example.com and also other something example.com. So it matches both, while at least in Cilium, the existing FQDN policies only match one level down. So it would only match on something example.com. And you would have to explicitly specify other subdomains to match on them. Is this something that was discussed, considered?
I don't remember discussing that case specifically.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe not that case specifically, but the point is that still domain ownership is kind of stacked there. So when you put a wildcard policy for example.com, what you're saying is that you trust example.com to be the good folks, which means that all subdomains that they still kind of manage in some way, or at least gave the management to someone else, this trust policy goes like a tree. So it doesn't make much sense to trust any subdomain on the first level, so like something 2, something 3.example.com, and then don't trust the other levels of that.
So, but I mean, there certainly are use cases where, like for instance, if you have a lab.example.com, right, where you're doing random silly things in the lab, like you don't necessarily want your real policy to, right? Like you can come up with use cases where it doesn't make sense to recurse like that.
But you wouldn't use the wildcarded match then, I would assume.
Well, if there are lots of hosts in example.com and you don't want to specify all of them. I mean, I guess the question is more, is it more useful to have a star that only matches one domain or a star that matches recursive subdomains, right? Like which one is more likely to help people and versus accidentally matching too much or too little?
I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be one or the other. So the way it will, if it gets implemented in Cilium, that will be implemented is if you use a single star, it matches on only the direct subdomain. If you specify a double star, at least that's the proposed solution, then it matches on all subdomains. We could do something similar here. So then the user can choose whether they want what the semantics that they want are.
I think we couldn't find a use case specifically where matching one label would be safer than matching all of them.
I think Dan's example makes sense, right? Like,
well,
you might have a subdomain where you're allowing just experimentation.
Yeah, but you're either allowing just one label, which is like lab.example.com, and then you say, oh, but I don't want to allow one.lab.example.com. How is that safer?
It is,
than just allowing,
because you might have delegated the ownership of one to some experimental. I think the trust relationship of like the name handing out is not the same. Like, for example, like bigcompany.com might not be very well controlled, but experimental.bigcompany.com could very well just be full of random junk. But what I'm hearing, though, is that if you don't start off with matching multiple labels, then it allows us to add it later as like a more specific match, which seems like it would, if the use case comes up, it's like a safer option. Like it basically allows us to distinguish the two cases versus going immediately with matching everything. Then how do you add it back easily?
I'm not sure if that's, well, I mean, again, if there is some good example with some big company, whatever domain name, that would make sense. That would be nice. Otherwise, if you don't trust lab.example.com to manage their subdomains in a safe way, it means you don't trust lab.example.com.
I disagree. Just so, because you can delegate it, right? Like it's delegated and they have different meanings.
If I delegate something to an unsafe subdomain, I could have delegated something unsafe to them, and my lab.example.com domain is it.
Well, you're talking about, I think you're mixing up like what the delegation means. The delegation means that, right, the trust relationship is just that, hey, here's a subdomain, you can kind of add, you can own it. But that doesn't mean that, for example, you control the security for like the outer one.
Antonio?
I think the direction is inverted.
My it's a side topic. Because of the ingress and gateway, I've been playing with the domains and matching on domains to domains and labels has an important cost on scalability and the implementation. So I just want to provide some feedback that when things start to getting complicated, also you need to. It's hard to implement, so be careful with adding too many regex or wildcards or labels or whatever. For example, the Envoy thing is they have 3 implementation to match on labels on domains or something like that.
Vinch has your hand raised.
So I think the question is not like, do you trust example.com to delegate or not? Like, we know that sometimes people delegate subdomains that are less trusted than the parent domain. So the question is, which way is going to be more useful to users if we have it recurse or if we have it don't recurse? Like, one way we risk matching too much, one way we risk matching too little. Which one is going to work better for people? And I don't think we have the answer on that.
Well, from a security perspective, and considering that this is a network policy, which is meant to implement some security policy on the network, matching less is probably the safer choice. I don't know if someone, the implications of matching less means that you would now have to specify all your subdomains. The implications of matching on all subdomains means that you would now have to, I don't know, explicitly deny all subdomains. I don't know if you could actually implement a policy that would make this safe in such a scenario, or just not use FQDN. So I would think that matching less is probably the more conservative and safer choice in this case.
I just want to point out that, like, if you match less, you could add something to allow you to match more in the future.
Yep, absolutely true.
Should we have the same outcome here and just continue this discussion offline? It sounds like it's also only getting deeper and not getting to any conclusion for now.
Yeah, so I wrote up an action item. Balazs, again, thanks for raising this as well. Please open an issue for this, and then we can try to see if we can get clarity on the use case versus the backwards compatibility issue we have if we go with matching too much now and not being able to go back part of this. And then we can discuss there. There are, I think, Bove and Antonio. Bove, you have your hand raised. Do you want to say something before we move on?
No, we can take it to the
topic?
issue, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Let's move on again. Service provider tier. Balazs, again, it's you.
I'll just briefly mention this because it came up in one of the discussions. It appears that some service providers, and I will not mention names, are using Cilium cluster-wide network policy to implement policies that they want to be applied to all clusters, and I mean every customer's cluster. And when we were discussing cluster network policy, one of the suggestions was that, this is another use case of how a cluster-wide network policy might be used, and it might be interesting to add a service provider tier to the cluster network policy. So that's a tier that can only be applied by the service provider and not overridden by the customer. And it sits above the admin tier. So this was a suggestion. I don't have any opinion in either direction. I'm just relaying the idea that was being presented.
Bowie, did you raise your hand for this or?
Yeah. So one trouble is that what would this mean? Because technically the cluster admin can edit anything. So like it doesn't like prevent anything from a practical like cluster configuration perspective. Like if they already can edit everything, then like how they could mess it up. Like how would you prevent the stuff that you want to prevent?
Is that the case in like GKE? I thought the authentication kind of goes back to the secret
So
API server, and you could override it if you wanted to, Bowie.
That's true, but I think we don't do anything like that. Like you're free to like delete everything and completely mess everything up. Like
So I can mention the name of who suggested it. It was Microsoft actually that suggested that they're doing the service provider tier thing using Cilium cluster-wide network policy. How they use it, I don't know. I don't think there's any Microsoft representatives on this call, so we can ask them. I just wanted to throw it out there to see if there's any interest in a tier like that. It came up mainly in the discussion of how how cluster network policy is behaving when other policies are being applied. So, we only specify the admin tier, the network policy tier, and the baseline tier. The issue here is that there are other policy types. So Cilium, for example, has two. And where do those fall in the hierarchy of admin versus network policy versus baseline? And that's where this discussion around service provider tier came up, because apparently someone is using it as a service provider tier policy.
So ignoring the auth problems, where if you do have a cluster where a cluster admin is not fully privileged, then, I guess you could create validating admission policies that say only your cluster admin cannot create a provider tier cluster network policy. This seems like something that we could compatibly add later, that we could add a new tier provider that is above the admin tier. Do people agree with that? And if so, then I feel like this is sort of solved for now, in that we could do it later if we decided it was important.
I think we can add tiers later, because we defined all the tiers so that if there's no policies in a tier, then it doesn't do anything. So adding an extra tier later it's deliberately extensible in that way, isn't it?
The only thing that I can think of from implementation perspective is if an implementation starts off with the assumption that admin would be the highest tier and starts blocking out priorities in a static way, it is going to be a headache for them on upgrade to kind of move that down and change priorities of all the rules down so that they can then accommodate the higher tier, but that's just an implementation data.
Which is why you should not implement your implementation like that.
Yeah, it shouldn't be closed off, but yeah, I guess we should at least make it explicit that if there are other tiers in the future, it's always expansible, the API.
Perhaps we can add a note in the CRD that mentions that there might be future tiers,
further tiers
that are higher prioritized than the admin tier.
And it should be something that the implementations check, that if they see a policy and it has a tier they don't know, then they should ignore that policy or raise an error or whatever.
Well, I would assume that should not be possible, right? So if you are implementing a specific version of a CRD, then that shouldn't suddenly change on you and add an additional tier, right?
Certainly not possible at the moment while we're the ones shipping the CRDs. We were kind of trying to design in a way that you can spot if you've been, in the future where say OpenShift ships the CRD, but you may install Calico or Cilium or something into your OpenShift cluster and you can't change the CRD, just to be able to detect that you've been subjected to version skew. That was the kind of, own up, Dan. It's going to be OpenShift that does this, isn't it?
I don't think so. We have no intention of doing that, but.
Oh, okay. I thought you generally like to sort of ship particular versions of things, but okay, maybe not.
Yeah, while we are on this topic,
Okay.
just another, I'm not sure I generally agree on that part where you shouldn't implement something in this uninterrupted priority range way. So if this piece of documentation is going to be updated, we may need an extra discussion.
I mean, we were discussing this.
If we go ahead, Dan.
We were discussing this before. There were links a few meetings back, but if we allow people to map particular cluster network policies to fixed internal priorities, then it places ludicrous compatibility, future extension constraints on us. And in the Ovian Kubernetes case, you're already not implementing it right. You can only deal with priority from 0 to 100. It's already failing. You have to change the way that it works.
I'm not sure that's true. We didn't finish that discussion, did we? So on that already doesn't work. Not sure, but what we are saying is some backends will not be able to implement that at all.
No, you need to dynamically map your priorities. Like that's just
Which
how it has
may
to
not
work.
be possible for some implementations, which we may have a deeper discussion on. What I'm saying is that's not obvious, at least to me, at least yet.
Yeah. Sorry, which one is not obvious? The fact that we say, hey, if you map it directly, then you probably will get in trouble, or like we should allow mapping it directly? Like which one?
Yeah, the point is that we pay zero attention during our API designs and redesigns to the fact that someone may be mapping our priorities to a range of priorities, saying this is just not the right way to implement that, don't do that. I'm not sure I agree with that, which doesn't mean we can never do API changes like that, but we may need to be thinking about that at least in some cases.
Okay, do you want to take a follow-up to write like how that would look like? Because it might be hard. In the previous discussion, it seemed like it would be impose like quite severe constraints. I guess
yeah,
the capsule summary is I don't know if we can solve it here in this discussion.
Right.
Maybe it's worth like having a not on Slack, but maybe like an issue or something.
I think let's take it in an issue and let's write it down on.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where's the good place to put that. But the only thing, I guess I missed one meeting at some point where this was discussed and like agreed on something. And is there any written outcome of that? Because now nothing says that, so it's a bit hard to fight the lack of information.
It was October 7th. There's some discussion in issue or pull request 319.
Yeah, but just so that we're clear, so this specific discussion around adding a new tier is happening for the first time. I think in the previous discussions, the discussion was around, we have 100 rules and then it's 1,000 policies, so 1,000 into 100. If we do a static priority 1:1 mapping, it might not work out. So implementations might have to do something dynamic mapping.
Well,
so in that context, right? But it's kind of the same thing. I get it. But just saying that
we already did add a new tier though, right? Like we used to have only one baseline policy and now we have a whole baseline tier. So
yeah, and we reduced the rules to 25.
Right, but that was for cell, not necessarily for like for this particular purpose, which Nadia is bringing up. So we should just be clear, like I think we need a specific issue to just track this problem.
Okay, I guess I found one comment that write down some pieces on that closed pull request that was referenced. So maybe I can turn that into some discussion or something.
I think it's worth
but regardless, just to come back
issue, to like yeah.
Yeah, but are we, so there's no concern in us adding a new tier, right? I hope that no one's opposed to that. Or are we saying that adding a new tier in itself is a problem because implementations won't expect that?
At
mean,
least
we
we're
just
not adding a new tier now, right? We're saying that implementations can expect in the future that potentially the project would add a new tier. Is that my read on that correct?
Yeah, that's what I also wrote down as the action item.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Thanks, Nadia, for taking that up. Let's move on. We only have 15 minutes left to Nadia's topic.
Yeah, that one's hopefully quick. I think I still didn't have many extra reviews on the protocols and PAP. We kind of agreed on the format, I think. The only last second change that Dan reminded me of is the rename of port to destination port, which I did. But then there is this fun field called named ports, and then I'm not sure if renaming that to named destination ports is also something we want to do, or is it a bit too far?
If you look at my PR, just flip over really quick. It has basically the example of all
Sure,
of
it
this.
does, but we didn't quite decide on that yet, I guess. So, I mean, it's just the name, right? Yeah, so I wasn't sure about the named ports part. So that's where we need to have a bit of extra discussion. And right after that, I hope to get all the LGTMs. And right after that, I can go on LGTM Bowie your implementation.
What I'm saying is, if you want to just see everything spelled out, it's in my it's in the comment in my PR. If you want to have an example to stare at,
yeah.
The destination name port is consistent, Dan. Like, you shouldn't be using name port anyways, so make you write like a long thing.
I don't hate it either way, but.
So do we want a quick agreement on that so that I can go and just
do we want to pull up the
LGTMs?
PR just to have something to look at? Like,
you mean your implementation one?
Well, I think I had to change
this one.
A couple of things, but can you just?
Yeah. But I mean, basically the only point is you can see it's all destination port there now, which is what we agreed on. The only thing we didn't quite agree on yet is destination named port, named destination port, whatever you like. If we can have an agreement now, that may make it faster in general. Dan?
Also, Antonio has a hand. I don't know if it's old.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, it's my question is about the discussion you put in API machinery about the client
that's another one.
I noticed. Okay, then my question is about that.
Related, but not exactly that one. Yeah, we can talk about that too. So about the names, strong yes, strong no's. I feel like most of people don't have a strong opinion, it looks like.
I think this destination named port is better because it conveys more clearly first where you're going and then what exactly you're doing.
So Sean, I think I originally had match, but then Dan pointed out that there's other places with like match stuff, and it got really confusing.
Fine.
So looking at this example here, it seems weird to me because destination named port is not a protocol, right? Like to the extent that there is a protocol, the protocol is named port. And the named port has destination semantics, right? So I'm
weakly. Port is a port and protocol, so it is a protocol.
I like match, but Dan, you were the one who was like, "Oh, that doesn't make sense."
Wait. No. I'm not talking about changing protocols.
Oh.
I like.
Please.
Oh, I only now noticed that this is under TCP and UDP. What is this supposed to do? Like match both TCP and UDP?
Wait a second. I'm really, really sorry. I just really want to make sure we have some agreement on this, like one tiny piece, and then we can continue to clarifying the semantics. Can we just stick to the destination named port, yay or nay?
I think yes, you have some votes on the chat as well. Anybody opposed to destination name port? Okay, let's fix that, Nadia.
Okay, yeah, I'm doing that then. And then please, I'll ping you again, well, 10 minutes probably after the meeting. Do SAML GTM so we can merge that and move on with the implementation.
And then
actually,
the other topic on the, oh, sorry. I was about to say that, Dan, you were mentioning that this looks weird under protocols. Do we want to dwell on that here, or do we want to take that feedback back to the end?
I'll go back to this PR.
Okay.
Well,
And somebody else had another concern? Oh, sorry, Boe, go ahead.
I mean, or you could make it up one level, I guess, out of protocols. And then say
It's still the destination named port, isn't it? Like
it's still
that part
destination
doesn't
named port,
change.
but Dan is like, what if we moved it one up? So it's
Okay, wait a
aligned.
second. Are we discussing now?
I didn't think he said that, or did he?
Oh, really? Okay.
No, I think he just said it looks weird, but yeah, we don't have alternatives yet.
Well,
I think we should take it back to the end.
I'm saying that it implies that destination named port is a kind of protocol, which it is not.
Right. That's what I'm saying is like
Doesn't it translate to it?
Yeah,
No,
it
no, no.
is.
Like to the extent that there's a protocol here at all, the protocol is named port, right?
Sure. It's our Kubernetes protocol, which translates to the normal protocols.
So adding the word destination, it's like, why don't we just say protocol destination TCP?
But it's not TCP.
No. I'm saying like add the word instead of saying protocol TCP destination port, just say protocol destination TCP port.
Because
right?
we
Like,
agreed that
that would
not
be
all
terrible,
TCP
right?
properties
Yeah,
only
that sounds
apply
weird.
to the destination. That's why there is
Right.
flags, which or something else that could apply to the full connection or something, right? We've been there.
well, okay. Do we want to just merge this one and then Dan, maybe
No.
we can
Okay. So Balazs was saying something before
Nice
that
try, Boe.
that I hadn't thought of, but now that I look at it, it's really bizarre. So what this says is that this accepts traffic on 2 TCP ports and 2 UDP ports. But that's really weird because the thing under protocols is not an array. It's a struct that has a TCP field and a UDP field, but we're saying that the semantics are that it matches both those TCP ports and separately also matches those UDP ports, which is really weird. I feel like it should either be an array under protocols, or else you should only be able to specify a single field. Well, no, that can't.
I'm going to raise my hand.
Go
So
ahead.
Dan, that's what I had in like the previous iteration, but I thought that after all the long discussion that we moved the array down.
It's possible that we
because
did,
it
but
causes
now
more
that
problems.
I see. Sorry, what did you say, Nadia?
It causes more problems if you have a list of all the port matches, because then you need to put protocol in there, and then the self-validation is more difficult, and then the whole what's the new way to validate fields?
Declarative validation.
Yeah,
the only
exactly.
thing is like the
So
cell is like
it's
not
not
that
that.
bad, but whatever.
Yeah, I don't remember what problems we had with prior versions. I'm just saying that looking at this now, it looks really weird. And Balazs, you have your hand up.
I think it doesn't just look weird. What is the actual semantics of this? So HTTPS can run either on TCP port 443 or UDP 443 for HTTPS version 3. So this matches both, or just one, or both. And I'm sure there's other protocols that have a TCP version. DNS has TCP and UDP.
So the issue here, this is an array. It says it matches all of those TCP ports, and it also matches all of those UDP ports. It's just not written as a top
It's
level.
OR together. It's like a
Balazs,
big OR.
are you asking about the named port?
Yes.
The named ports are the like pod specified ports. So each pod
Oh,
can have a named port that says HTTP is actually on port 8080 or 8081 or
gotcha.
whatever.
Okay, you give it the name. Yes. Okay.
And that it's
Ignore
a
me.
horrible feature.
Okay, so then the
okay.
NTAP itself has all the options with like the least and the not least. You can go look at them again, read I think there was some justification for one versus the other. Maybe even put a hold on that pull request because we were getting close to like actually merging that. So if you have strong feelings about that now, to express it somehow so that it doesn't get merged accidentally. But what most importantly, let's get some reviews on that.
Do we can we give ourselves just like a deadline, because I think we've gone over this like so many times. Like maybe everyone just, what are the actually just in like 3 minutes, like what are the options that we're looking at potentially, or like what are the things we hate? Is there like a short list? You're not allowed to hate everything.
I hate the fact that the protocol struct has array-like semantics instead of, or the protocol struct has or semantics instead of and semantics. Like it should be an array of separate elements, not a struct with array-like semantics.
Okay, so I think maybe it's like or semantics.
I think it wasn't it Tim who pushed back on the array of protocols because he didn't like how you could get kind of very overlapping entries in your array that sort of have confusing semantics when they all overlap.
Yeah, we'll have to go with like discriminated union kind of thing if we do that as single array. So you say protocol TCP, TCP colon, and then all the fields that apply to that protocol. And then you would have a self-validation saying only one off and make sure that the type of the match matches the actual fields.
The one-off doesn't need to be self-validation. I think it was like a do not repeat yourself, where it's like protocol TCP and then you have a TCP struct. Or we have the bag of stuff.
I'm really sorry to interrupt. You have like 3 minutes and 2 more items. I think action item is Slack thread. Slack thread
Okay.
for any more discussion, and then take it back to Bove's PR or Nadia's NPEP. Okay.
So
thanks everyone.
While you're typing, I'll go on to my next item because it's quick.
Yes, please do. Yep.
I was cleaning up a bunch of random to-do items that I had and ended up filing a KEP issue for an enhancement on a standardized label for differentiating system and user namespaces. So right now it is just a KEP issue. There's no actual KEP, but it's tagged help wanted. If somebody wants to write a KEP for that, or knows somebody who wants to write a KEP, that would be cool.
Thanks, Dan, for following that up. I think that's something that at least we are interested in from OpenShift side. Okay, and another item is from Antonio.
Yeah,
Bove, did you want to say something on that?
No, go ahead.
What is the technical problem for the need to change the serializer and the APIs? Because I thought that we use different APIs and we don't not convert between versions.
We do use different APIs. Let me point you to an issue that we opened that has a lot of details on that.
Okay, then I can read that.
Yeah.
But
Then we go to a really good one.
If each client fetch its independent group, you don't. If we don't change.
No, it's about older clients compatibility, which like you wouldn't probably see in normal clusters, but it applies in scenarios where you have upgraded the CRD version, but you still have the old client running, which could happen on like downgrade scenarios we discussed. And currently there are not many options, but if we ever have more implementations for the same API in the future in gateway style, you could have potentially multiple clients running
But did
different
you,
versions.
but I mean, groups, are we changing the fields in the same group? We don't know.
So I'm
Yeah,
having
but I think we are.
I'm having trouble opening that Slack link, but there was a discussion that I think Sean started that then got totally waylaid because they thought we were talking about the differences between Kubernetes API groups when we were actually talking about differences within a single API group. So if this is a link to that conversation is
Oh, I
is
can read
confusing
it.
and wrong.
Yeah, I can read it. Look, because the thing is, if the clients, we don't do conversion. So the clients only work with the
Correct.
version and group that we define. If we don't change anything within the same group, if you need to do upgrade and handle everything, you need to do everything client side, and you need to do the conversion. Oh, is that okay? 340. Okay, we are out of time. I will read it and do my.
Cool.
Because
Thanks.
that's why I'm surprising. If we are not doing anything server side, why the client will have problem? The gateway problem was different because they have the experimental and the other thing, and they were changing fields within the same group. Then the clients got confused because they
Right. That's what we're talking about here.
But we are not doing the experimental thing, are we?
Well, but when you add new fields like that they don't understand.
But we are adding the new fields in a different group.
No. We're never changing the
Oh.
group. Or well, I mean,
A group person.
Well, eventually you have to add some field, right? Like, unless you're saying.
No,
like,
I'm not
eventually you
saying
have to
that.
add to the API.
I'm just trying to understand the problem because it wasn't clear to me. But losing what? Okay, that's compatibility constraint.
Okay, sounds like Antonio will read the issue and take it from there.
Because depending on the old client, okay, you add a new field, the old client keeps operating with the existing field, but that's not a problem.
That's not a problem, but the user, it's the problem. You should read the bottom of it, but the scenario is like you upgrade and you downgrade. That's the problem. Anyways, I highly recommend just reading it because it's like pretty long, but it's actually like Dan did a pretty well written thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. That's all in the agenda, and we are way over time. Thanks everyone for joining. See you again in 2 weeks.
Bye.